Hi, we want to welcome you to our devotional in preparation for Ash Wednesday. And let me instruct you that we will have a drive-by where you can receive the ash. And we're going to be doing it as a team. So Reverend Ashworth will be helping out. After I'm done recording for the service, I'll be out there. So there are several of us that will be helping. So in case you drive by and you're like, where's Hugo? I'm in the sanctuary recording. So I would like us to reflect on a passage in John chapter 13, verses 21 through the end of 30. And these verses basically will help us to understand how to prepare for Ash Wednesday and what is the significance of having the ash and the sign of the cross so that we can walk around all day. And I'm going to give you 3 perspectives that will help us through this journey so that whenever you drive through and you receive the ash, spiritually you might understand what we're trying to do. So let me read this passage, and this is the conversation that Jesus is having with his disciples during the Last Supper. And it says in verse 21 of chapter 13 of the Gospel of John, after he had said this, Jesus was troubled in spirit and testified, I tell you the truth, one of you is going to betray me. His disciples stared at one another, at a loss to know which one of them he meant. One of them, the disciple whom Jesus loved, was reclining next to him. Simon Peter motioned to this disciple and said, ask him what he means. Leaning back against Jesus, he asked him, Lord, who is it? Jesus answered, it is the one to whom I will give this piece of bread when I have dipped it in the dish. Then dipping the piece of bread, he gave it to Judas Iscariot, son of Simon. As soon as Judas took the bread, Satan entered into him. What are you about to do? Do quickly, Jesus told him. But no one at the meal understood why Jesus said this to him. Since Judas had charge of the money, some thought that Jesus was telling him to go buy what was needed for the feast or give something to the poor. As soon as Judas had taken the bread, he went out, and it was night. Now, one of the reasons why we have the tradition of Ash Wednesday and preparing through that journey through Easter is basically to empathize with the human suffering that Jesus went through. So Ash Wednesday allows us to wear the mourning and the symbol of suffering and the symbol of darkness and the symbol of the ignominious road of suffering that Jesus walked in. And notice that John tells us in verse 21 that after Jesus was very troubled in spirit. Jesus was worked up inside with sadness because he was going to experience betrayal by one of his own disciples. And most of us have lived enough life to know how painful it is when someone smiles at you, they shake your hand, but then they take the other hand and they stab you in the back. We know what it means to be betrayed. We know what it means to have someone put money inside of us. I can't tell you how many kids I have ministered to whose parents had a lot of money, and they chose money over spending time with them, over going on vacations with them. And we know of great businessmen and even great preachers whose children turned out to be dismal failures because they did not take the time to nurture them. And for those kids growing up, it was a betrayal, an emotional betrayal of love. And now Jesus is experiencing this betrayal, this emotional suffering of being betrayed by his disciples. And then we empathize also when he was in the Garden of Gethsemane. And he prayed to the Father and he said, Father, is there any way that I can redeem humanity without having to suffer in the cross? And we know that there was no way. He had to drink the bitter cup of suffering, of the crucifixion, of being mocked. This was his call, and Jesus wanted to get out of it from a human perspective, but he could not. So then he said to his disciples, could you just pray with me? Could you just watch with me? And the moment that he really needed them, they fell asleep in him. So we relate to that human suffering of Jesus, to that agony in which when he most needed his friends, when he most needed his disciples, they failed him and they fell asleep. And he had to agonize. He had to experience the loneliness of having to face the cross by himself. So we empathize with that, and we remember that his suffering, that all that he went through, being kissed on the cheek, by being flogged and being put a crown of thorns and facing the masses who the week before had said, blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord, Hosanna, Hosanna. Those same people were the ones who were out in the praetorium and yelling, crucify him, crucify him. They chose Barabbas, a criminal, someone who was sentenced to die over Jesus Christ. And that was the suffering. So when we receive the mark of the cross, we remember his suffering. And with gratitude, we say, thank you for your suffering. Thank you that your loss brought me this gain. Thank you that because of what you did, your ignominious death and your giving of yourself over to suffering is what brought us joy. Now, as we remember that, but also Ash Wednesday is an opportunity to invite Christ into our suffering, to invite Christ into our agony. What are you agonizing over? What difficulties are you going through? And this is an invitation for us to say, Jesus, I am lonely. Jesus, I have a cup that I'm drinking. It's the cup of sickness. I have a cup, Lord, and I am going to go through the cup of suffering of chemotherapy. And I need you to come and be with me. And Jesus empathizes with our suffering, and he knows what it's like to move through life without having anyone with us. So if you're going through health issues, if you're going through financial crisis, if you're going through the courts and you're suffering, he went through the courts. He was tried and he suffered as a criminal when he was not. So he empathizes with our suffering. So this Ash Wednesday is a time when, as you allow the minister to put the sign of the cross on you, it's a way for you to say, I empathize with your suffering, Jesus, but I also invite you to empathize with my suffering. For those of you who have lost loved ones because of the pandemic, or those of you who have lost loved ones in the pandemic, not necessarily because of COVID, this is a time that you invite Christ into your mourning. This is a time that you invite him into your suffering. And that's what the cross can symbolize, you saying, empathize with my suffering. There is a third dimension. We look back to the past, what Christ did. We invite him into our present. But Ash Wednesday is also pointing us to the future of the resurrection. And it allows us not to just stay stuck in the suffering. It's a bad thing that he experienced. Oh, my life is so messy. There is so much darkness. But Ash Wednesday points to the resurrection. It points to the hope that we have in Jesus Christ. And this is the most powerful thing about Ash Wednesday. Do you know where the ashes come from? Yes, let me tell you. Right in this little bottle here, these are the ashes of the palm branches from last year. And when we celebrate Hosanna, Hosanna, Hosanna to the Son of David, and we allow those palms to wither, then they're burnt, and then the ashes are preserved for a year, because we look to the future, we look towards what God is going to do. So whenever we mix the ash of palms from last year, we wait for a year, we project into the future, and that means that we invite Christ, the resurrected Christ, to bring hope into our lives. So is there something that you're hoping for? Are you hoping for healing? Are you hoping for restoration? Are you hoping for a better financial future? Are you hoping that your business will pick up at the end of 2021. So the sign of the cross invites us to receive the hope of the future, to have faith that God is going to do something good, to have faith that God is going to raise us up. So when you go through the drive-thru, you empathize. You look back to the past and you empathize with Christ, how he suffered so that you and I would have life, and we say thank you. Then you invite Christ into your suffering. Whatever is amiss, whatever is falling off the rails in your life, this is an opportunity for us to say, Christ, I need you to empathize with me. Can you pray with me? He's seated right now at the right hand of the Father, and he intercedes for the saints. Jesus, could you pray to the Father for me? I need a break in this situation. And then we project with the sign of the cross into the future, into the resurrection, into Easter. That this Easter, we are saying we want a good Easter Sunday in Pueblo. We want a good Easter experience in our lives so that when we reopen and when we come back, we're not just opening the building, we're opening our hearts for Christ to come in and to do something special in our lives. So, as you drive through on Wednesday, may God bless you. May you empathize with the suffering of Christ. May you invite him to empathize with your suffering. And let us all look to the future in hope that Christ is the one who brings us life and brings us abundant life. God bless you. God bless you.